So here we'll look at the Mid-Fidelity prototype for the volunteer page on the Famous Fido website. We've got consistent like other pages, just a bright, colorful hero image along with 1 to 2 sentences about the contents of the page. Not exactly sure about having a call to action to apply right in the hero because we do want people to read about the roles before they apply, but that's something that we'll see after a little bit more user testing before actually we go live with it. If we're going to do that. We've got the steps laid out for what it takes to become a volunteer and some prominent emphasized roles that have icons to go with them, as well as discrete cards. Each card contains a breakdown of what the role is, what's expected of the person fulfilling the role, and what their qualifications would need to be. Then we've got other roles needed that are just kind of lower priority, but still necessary for the rescue. This was something in user testing where people showed that they like to see at least a list of the things that are possibly needed so they could find the one that they could self-select and apply. And so, but the main thing I wanted to do was to establish a hierarchy between priority roles and lower priority roles, things that are already filled or require a different application process that's maybe more general than one of these specific needs. So that's the Mid-Fidelity prototype in desktop form. And here for the mobile layout, we've got a similar approach as other pages as to how to take a desktop layout and make it responsive, which is essentially to work down to a one-column design, taking the cards that were individual prominent roles that we wanted to feature and focus on, and just making them cards that are aligned vertically instead of having the tabbed approach to progressively revealing information. On the mobile view, I think the better move would be to just have a quick 1 to 2 sentence breakdown of what a role entails, along with a call to action to apply, just on the assumption that one, people who are viewing this on mobile aren't taking as much time to really scan through everything as in depth as they would be if they were looking up a role to volunteer on their own desktop in their home. And also just to try and accomplish less, to do less, uh, more convoluted sort of approaches to design and getting as much shown in as small a space as possible. It just seemed to be a little bit too involved of a process. But as far as the rest of the layout of the page and how everything is constructed, we've got the hero image keeping the same bright colors, but taking out the body of text so as to not clutter the beginning of the page. We've got the 4 steps to the volunteer process, but instead of laying those out completely vertically and taking up the entire height of the initial viewport with just steps, which is not a huge priority for people to see, just something important. We instead made that a 2 by 2 layout so that it would take up less space. And then at the bottom, we've got the other roles needed in a simple checklist where you can self-select and apply. So that's the mobile version. And next, we'll take a look at the live version of the volunteer page for the Famous Fido website. This is what's going on currently. Things we kept from the Mid-Fidelity prototype were the hero image. Really like the colors on that one, as well as the passage of text to give a preview for the page. Took out the submit an application call to action in the hero because the idea is for people to read the page, and if they don't have to, they can just do the one thing they were coming here to do. It defeats the purpose a bit. Plus, any motivated volunteer who's serious about applying is not going to quit just because there isn't a CTA at the top for them to apply. So there was little loss, but an important gain in making that decision. Then for the important roles to feature, I decided instead of using some kind of sterile icons to find images that would make them a little more attractive. So we've got some cutesy cats creating media content. We've got an adorable dog entering something into a database, a cutesy dog reading from a book, et cetera, et cetera. And one request from the stakeholder was to include prominent and visible before the application process a breakdown of hours that are required for specific roles of when people are needed and whether or not the job is a hybrid role or flexible, sometimes in person, sometimes not. So we wanted to make that clear up front. And that is why that's a part of the card itself and not behind the application or with the hidden text that explains more about the roles. This was done just to make there be less to read as compared to the original site where you would have a role, you would have a few sentences about it right after, and then you would just have the next role. I wanted to break that up and give people a more diverse set of things to look at and allow themselves to progressively reveal information so they could choose their own reading workload. And that is what is set up for the main roles that are being featured. Other important roles, this I didn't have time to create individual applications for, like for all of the specialized much needed roles. Each of these apply calls to action go to different applications that are geared toward just the role that's being featured. But for other important roles, we've got a general application that has people check off which of these they're applying for and asks more general questions, because if they're going to require follow-up, in any case, Gloria, the stakeholder, likes to meet anybody who wants to handle a dog. People who are transporting need to have a special phone conversation with volunteer coordinators. So this was made more of a quick one sentence, two sentence breakdown of what the job is, a quick icon just to catch the eye, and an apply call to action. Something I'm not terribly fond of is having calls to action hidden. I think if it's going to be all one call to action, or at least one that goes, these calls to action all go to the same application, it probably should be just one button at the bottom of the section. That's easy to find. There's something to be said for having people need to want it, to have to actually look and mouse over something to prove they're reading something before they just click the apply button. But I think that's a minor gain as compared to the benefit of just having things be simple, obviously self-explanatorily laid out. I think that's just a much better approach. So that's something we're probably going to do in iterations. Then the final section we have here is just a quick reassurance for the volunteer that they are volunteering for a 501c3. We've got picture of a dog that's actually residing at the rescue, not stock photography. So to give people a little bit more of a personal connection to the place. And we've got another quick blurb about what sort of hours volunteers would expect to work. That is the 3-section breakdown of the volunteer page for the live Famous Fido website. Next, we'll get a look at the mobile version of it. Our most common device people use to browse the Famous Fido site is an iPhone, so we'll look at that view. You can see here that much like in the Mid-Fidelity prototype, things are broken down into a single column layout. We didn't find a lot of need to break down the steps of volunteer applying for people as they were going. It's pretty understood. You're going to click through one of these applications, you're going to submit it, somebody's going to get back to you. We can easily put a thanks for applying, we will respond to you within X hours message right at the end of the application rather than spelling it out at the front end and taking up space to do it. So that's not there. And you can see we've got the basic single column breakdown of the layout from the desktop style. One thing I didn't want to do in Mid-Fidelity prototype, but I think is okay to do actually, is to have the drop downs that will give more explanations of the role, primarily because I wanted the initial state of the page on mobile view to still be light on text, to not give the user too much to read. But there is a need for some kind of explanation for what the role is for these much needed roles before they just apply. And the UI didn't turn out to be terribly difficult to program. In Figma and the Mid-Fidelity prototype, it was kind of a bear trying to get it was kind of a bear trying to get these kind of drop downs to work, and I thought it would probably be even more trouble when working in WordPress, but it turned out not to be. So we kept it that way. And when it gets down to the other important roles section, this is a bit of a problem because there is no mouse over to highlight things to show the calls to action. You actually have to tap in order for something to highlight and for a call to action to apply. So that's something on iterations that's going to be changed. This is not something that is changeable in WordPress. There's not a way to make something mouse over capable on desktop and just by default visible on mobile views. So then the move is going to have to be to take these apply calls to action that are hidden until tapping out of those sections and just make a single apply call to action that is visible after the user has gone through the entire section. But that is the extent of the single column layout and how everything's executed for the volunteer page on the mobile view. And there is pretty much nothing left to say. Those are all my reasons and why I did the things I did.